Welcome to Package, the official podcast of the Liquor Stores Association of Western Australia. Your host today, Peter Kapsanis.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the best podcast on all things liquor, Package, proudly brought to you by the Liquor Stores Association of Western Australia. On the show, we catch up with the new CEO of the Small Business Development Corporation. Well, he's not so new, he's been in the gig for quite a while now. Mr. Saj Abdoolakhan, the SBDC, is there to help sole traders and small businesses in WA thrive. And I'm pleased to say Saj joins me in the LSA studio to talk all things small businesses and what makes it tick. Saj, good to have you on the show and welcome to the first video podcast that the LSA has produced.
Thank you, Peter. Thank you for having us, and thank you to give us the honor of being on the very first one. So, thanks.
It's exciting. You've now, Saj, a bit of background about you. You've worked across energy safety, building regulation, consumer protection, and now small business advocacy. What's attracted you to the role?
I'm an electrical engineer by trade, and I initially joined the public sector for what I thought was going to be a very short stint. But very quickly, I realized there was a lot I could add. I could do at the time to protect consumers. I help influence ministers and government at the time to improve legislation around energy safety, and we did that, and we looked after tradies and consumers in electrical and gas trades, and then I went on to manage the building regulator and looked after the building industry and consumers of the building industry. But very quickly I realized there was a lot what can be done here. To make sure one is consumers are getting the right service from these small businesses, but also the small businesses are able to thrive. And that's what I did in my previous role as the building commissioner and the director of energy safety. And that's when this role became available, I thought, look, I think I can take that to the next level in trying to help more small businesses thrive in WA.
Now, recap for me, what's the mission and the purpose of the SBDC? And I touched on it on my intro, but when we say helping small businesses thrive and grow, what do we actually mean, and how does it do that?
So what we want is when people are very passionate, that's why we get into a small business, right? We want them to start the right way. We want them to get the right advice at the very beginning, and they start the business well. Sometimes what we see is people start the business and then halfway through it, they realize they haven't thought through about certain elements on how we're going to manage certain things. So that's what we're here to help them, to think about it, think about all the implications, give them the right advice, the right business advice when they start, right? And then as they grow, be able to hold their hands. We've got workshops which we do. We've got our business advisors are people who used to run their own businesses. Some of them are still running their own businesses. So we're giving them customized advice, right? So they can grow their business. And when you're running a business, as you will know, sometimes there are disputes, business to business disputes, and we can help them with that as well. We can give them the right advice. What's very important for small businesses is they make the right decision at the right time. Sometimes one small or one wrong decision can really take the wrong turn, and the small business doesn't survive. And that's what we're here for them. We want them to know we are here to help them turn to us, right? Whether it's for your setting up, whether it's for you to try and expand your business, or you got a dispute with another business, with your commercial tenancy or with your landlord, talk to us, turn to us. We're here to help.
Yes, turn to us. It's the theme of a campaign you're in the middle of as well, which we'll talk about down the track. But talk to me about the state of play of small businesses or small business in WA. What kind of or what level of economic contribution does small business make on an annual basis in WA? How big or how small is it, and what kind of economic driver and employer is it?
Look, we think small business is big business in WA, right? We cater for at least 50 billion in the economy, right? So it's big business, right? When you put all small businesses together, whether it's in the supply chain or whether it's small businesses on their own, right? They cater for 97% of businesses in WA.
97% of all businesses in WA. That's a massive number.
It is, right? So small businesses for us is big business, right? It's one is what we bring to the economy, but what we see other thing as well is when you look at the small businesses, is the fabric of, if you look at in some communities, the little cafe and all that, you get that personalized touch. There's where the community is involved, the community feels it's very much part and parcel of a community, right? And I'm not saying big businesses are not important. Big businesses are important, but I think the passion and the service you get from small businesses, I think you can't compare that.
How many registered small businesses are there in WA at the moment?
There's no registration for small business. There's no registration. So there are 260,000 small businesses, but they don't have to be registered. And when we're talking about that, they can be in construction, in retail, in hospitality. So it's a broad range of industries we cater, right? From anything from retail to hospitality to your cafe, to builders, your chiropractor. Everyone's running a small business.
Oh, I understand there's been a bit of a post-COVID boom in small business in WA over the last 5 years. And there's certain industries or sectors which have grown, some of which you touched on, but what are sort of the top 5 growing small business sectors? Do we know what they might be?
Look, construction is definitely there. I mean, with the government trying to build more, I think there's a need for more houses, accommodation, more housing in the WA. There's a lot of investment in, government is very keen on creating more jobs. So the construction industry is very much high up there. There's also services, the services industry. People providing professional services to our small businesses. We're very much up there. The retail industry has been expanding and flourishing. It's a good sign. It's a sign of a very good economy. I mean, having the mining industry booming, you've got all your allied trades helping the mining industries as well. And with the government investing, heavily in AUKUS, we're expecting there'll be more opportunities for small businesses in that sector as well.
Yeah, we'll talk about AUKUS and I guess also what's happening in the Middle East at the moment. But I'm keen to know, what are some of the problems or issues that small businesses typically come to the SBDC advisor group? What do you find, typically that they want help on? And you mentioned that, you're there to make sure that they don't come at the last minute, but obviously people often do come, I guess at the last minute. They've realised they've made the error and are trying to correct it. So what are the sort of the common mistakes that small business owners or sole traders will come to get help with?
Look, one of the most common one, Peter, is disputes about commercial tenancy. I won't call it a mistake, but sometimes there are different interpretation of what the contract or the contract between like a tenant and the landlord actually allows for. And we generally can, and we do, provide advice to both parties and try to find a resolution, amicable resolution between the parties most of the time. And we'll give both sides, including the tenant and the landlord, advice on our interpretation of what we think should happen in this case. It's on a case-by-case basis. So I would say this is one of probably the highest ones we get. But we also, could be about a vehicle, because for some
a vehicle
tradies, vehicle is very much part of, what they need to do their business.
Right.
And so we do get, some of them will come to us about, the vehicle's not there when they need it. It has to be serviced, or it has to, to have to be repaired, to be repaired done to it when we're relying on it to run the business, right? So we do intervene in that space as well and give them advice, and where possible as well, talk to the traders to try and find an amicable resolution between the parties. But if all fails, then we'll give a small business advice in terms of what's the next step from there. And people do come to us for financial advice as well.
I was going to say, what about bookkeeping and ATO advice? Because managing the books, a lot of people are self-starters, so they're not accountants, are they?
We don't generally provide financial advice. We'll provide them advice up to a certain point, but when it gets to the nitty-gritty of financial advice, we'll point them in the right direction to get in-depth professional advice. But most of the time, when they do come to us, there are things we can give them tips up front, how to manage, the ATO debts. And also when you look at, when rising costs, we'll probably touch on the fuel issue a bit later, but you look at rising costs as well. People sometimes are in two minds. I mean, how do I deal with that rising cost? How do I deal with a business-to-business dispute, like someone has passed on an increase in costs to me as as a retailer or as a hospitality business? How do I dispute that, or how do I have a conversation with other parties? It can be business to business, and what we do help people as well is through the approval process. I mean, your members as well will be applying for licenses, So we have been working on a project to try and streamline approval processes for businesses. So we've been working with several government agencies to try and streamline the process to make sure, a small business, when we're applying for licenses, we don't have to shop around to 5, 6, 7 or 8 different government agencies to get the information we need. So we're trying to collate all of that, have a bit of a one-stop shop where if you're setting up, like a craft brewery, for example, which is one of the businesses we helped recently, we want them to be able to come to one point and have one location where they can find all the forms, all the necessary approvals, and they know the full pathway to get all the approvals to start the business.
The SBDC, and that's it's good that you mentioned the craft brewery, because I think it's it's more than relevant to our members at the LSA who mum and dad, independent liquor store owners, and I guess I would know that a lot of the advice and the offering that the SBDC provides is more than relevant and probably music to their ears. I'm sure they wouldn't want to be spending it on lawyers in the first instance. So you're in the middle of a campaign. It's called Turn to Us, and you used that phrase a bit earlier on. I guess part of it is to increase your visibility and the awareness around the offering, because the SBDC has been around for a while now, for around 40 years. Is that right?
Yep.
So why do you think, why is it important for a government agency like the SBDC to exist?
Look, we provide free advice to small businesses, right? And I think in the current world where people think, all right, look, we'll go ask AI or go on the internet and search for things.
Well, is that a competitor, AI?
Not really, not at all, not at all. In fact, AI is an enabler. I think it's a way of for people to find information. But you have, as you would know, I mean, with AI, you have to be careful as well in terms of what you ask and how you ask to be able to get the right answer, right? But as for us being a government agency, the government wants to see small businesses thrive, right? And when small businesses are interacting with government, sometimes a lot of them will find it pretty daunting to have to go to different agencies to know where to get their licenses, to know what to pay, whether it's local government, whether it's Department of Water, whether it's local government. What we are here to do is to help facilitate that, being that point of call where the small business can come to, and we can guide them in the right direction to save them time. Because the whole point here, we want them to be more productive, Peter, right? We don't want them to, most small businesses are sole traders.
Yes.
We don't want them to be spending all their time or most of their time hunting around for this information, right? When time is money for them, right? We want them to be able to find that information very quickly and be able to spend more time on the shop floor doing what they do best.
Time is definitely money, I can attest to that. So let's talk about costs. You touched on that as well. We've got a fuel crisis. It's I guess relaxed a bit now in the Middle East, but we don't know what's going to happen or what's coming around the corner. You're part of a government task force around that. What's your role in that task force in terms of the ongoing fuel crisis and what's happening there in the Middle East?
Look, the task force, I want to clarify there, Peter. The task force is a task force of ministers, right? So it's 10 ministers, and WA was the only government who set up a task force dedicated to look at supporting industry with a fuel crisis. So it's a task force of ministers headed by the Deputy Premier. My role was to coordinate the work of this task force, sit down with when the ministers are having discussions, go and work with industry to find practicable solutions to help industry deal with the cost increases, right? So quite a few of the recommendations from that task force were not necessarily financial in nature. We looked at ways of streamlining approvals, for example, of improving regulatory pathways to make it easier for small businesses, to transport things, for example, and in that process, manage the cost of transport, right, and manage the cost, the flow-on effect of the increase in fuel, the cost of fuel, and the increase in cost of transport on small businesses.
Were you inundated with queries and calls for advice when the war happened in the Middle East at the time, when we saw that sudden explosion in petrol prices? What kind of leaning on did you have and feel?
Look, we had quite a few. I mean, we saw an increase in the number of calls. I won't say inundated, and that's why the campaign, I think, was quite timely when we launched it, in terms of making sure at the time people knew there was someone they could turn to, and the SBDC is here to help them. So we did see a spike. We would have liked to see even more people coming to us. I think the campaign, in a way, was quite successful. It was timed in a way, but at the right time where people saw it and they knew there was someone they could turn to. Right? We gave them advice, because I think some of the questions we had during the peak of the war or the fuel crisis initially was, how do we pass on these costs? If I pass on the costs, I have to increase all my prices.
Yes.
How about if my competitor doesn't do that, right? So what we did, our business advisors, as I said, they people who used to run their own businesses. Some of them are still running their own businesses, so they know exactly what we're talking about. And the advice we gave to people who rang during that time was customized for the situation. So in some cases, some of them would have received advice, but I think we would recommend that you pass on this cost, you don't absorb it. Whereas in other cases, there will be scenarios where the advice could have been a bit different, depending on the situation the small business was in and the competition and everything around the environment we're working in.
All right, well, let's talk about the cost of doing business, because we've had the federal and state budget handed down in recent weeks. Some would argue that the federal budget and the changes around negative gearing and capital gains tax is going to have more than a trickle effect on housing, affordability, and the cost of doing business, where obviously those properties are perhaps tied in with certain businesses. So in that sense, we also have the state budget, where I guess the so-called sweetener was $100 fuel voucher, but we understand now that's going to be, expanded possibly. But what else is in the state budget specifically for small businesses in terms of perhaps grants or opportunities for funding to be accessed? Is there anything around that where, if you're a small business or a sole trader, where you can apply for some kind of helping hand?
I think, look, there are quite a few things we do. I think one thing I want to start up with is sometimes when we look at budgets, people are saying, look, what sweeteners do we have? And is there financial incentives? I don't think, what's important, but I don't think it's always about financial incentives or it's always about tax breaks, right? There are some
cost savings, yeah.
But I think what's important as well, when we looked at the budget, I looked at it as the commissioner. When we look at it, it's about the economic environment, right? There's so much investment in, we talk about, the Made in WA plan. We talk about diversified WA. There's a lot of, investment in different industries to manufacture more in WA. I think this in itself creates a good economic environment for small businesses, whether it's in the supply chain or whether it's our support services around these main areas for small businesses to thrive, right? That's where, when I look at it from that angle, I think there's a lot of promise in the state budget to help small businesses grow and thrive. There's a lot of opportunities for small businesses in there. But talking about the specifics, we talk about investment in energy, right? And we're going to try and build like power lines, build wind turbines in WA. Who's going to do that? Small businesses, right? So that's what I mean by the economic environment. So there'll be more work for your manufacturing small businesses, and there'll be more work for people who are supplying to these supply chains, whether it's in the energy space, whether it's making more rail and train in WA. So it will be small businesses.
Sure, but for
doing
mum and dad owned stores,
Yeah.
liquor stores, what's in the state budget that's of benefit to them?
With grants, we had a first round of a small business growth grant, which was very successful, right? The government has committed another 1.4 million in the budget for another round of a growth grant, right? And the whole intent of a grant is to help establish small businesses grow by tapping into professional services,
Right.
which will help them grow their business, whether it's in not necessarily to spend the money to do marketing, but to get professional services to help them
Marketing's a
market their business.
big part of it, I suppose.
It is important, but what we're saying is we don't want them to use the money to pay for marketing whether it's on Facebook or what,
Sure.
but we want them to use the money to get the services to know how to do marketing and grow their business going forward. It's more about the professional services to grow the business
Strategy around that.
around that.
Yeah, okay. And that's, how much did you say? 1.6?
1.4 million.
1.4 million.
Yeah.
Is there any more funding on the table for other areas of growth at all?
I think, look, the main one from which the SBDC is managing, that's that. There's like, if you look at, with TAFE, there's like fee-free and lower TAFE fees. All these sort of things will help, like, apprentices, and these apprentices will,
Yeah.
feed into different industries, whether it's hospitality or your electrical or construction trades. All of these, will help small businesses.
It's good to have this funding and these opportunities available and the support available. And we touched on it already that typically small businesses, when they're in trouble, will, it'll be a lastminute.com kind of cry for help. What has to change in the culture whereby people aren't waiting for the last minute to seek help? Given that you've been around for 40 years, what's the one message you think? What's the one message to those small business owners and sole traders in terms of not waiting to the last minute?
And that's exactly it. Don't wait for when you're in trouble to look for help. There are ways you can get. You may not think you need it, but there are probably different ways. People are very passionate when they're running a small business. They think they know it all, but I think coming to us, the workshops we run can help them look at things from a different angle, and we do have a little bit of, when we're talking to our business advisors, a bit of a community of practice where we can get to share ideas. We meet other people during these workshops where we can learn from each other about there are things where I think I can do better, or there are things which are not really working for me. I can learn from these other people and get even better, right? There's work for us as well as the agency, and we acknowledge that. That's why we'll be going out to raise our profile. We want people to know about us, more about us, and I don't think I mentioned it yet, but 97, I think I quoted the figure 97 earlier, but 97% of people who has come to SBDC have reported they're very happy with the service they've received from us, right?
Mm.
But my concern is they don't come to us enough, they don't come to us early enough. And that's what we are trying, one, through advertising, two, through word of mouth for people who's been to us to help us raise our profile so people know there's a group of people here. Our core business, our sole business is to help them establish themselves well, make the right decisions when we have important decisions to make, to thrive and to grow.
I know we touched on it a short time ago, and you said it wasn't a competitor, it's an enabler, but AI, whether it be Claude or ChatGPT or Copilot or whatever it might be, how do you see artificial intelligence impacting on the landscape of small business where it can be used for a whole range of things, whether it be, writing LinkedIn posts or strategy or plans or whatever it might be? What kind of role does that play in building a small business plan?
Okay. Look, we do help with small business plan, and we do offer workshops on AI as well.
Oh, you do? Okay.
And I think it's with AI, it's important to know how to use it. If you ask it or you train it the wrong way, you'll get the wrong answer, right? We've seen people sometimes, like business-to-business disputes, they go to AI, they ask a question, they get an answer, they type it in an email, and they make the dispute, which could have been solved earlier and easier.
It only magnifies a dispute.
It magnifies the dispute, right? Because AI, if you don't ask it the question the right way, if you haven't trained it the right way, doesn't differentiate whether you're in Western Australia or it's quoting law in somewhere in the US, in Kansas, in the US, or whatever. So it's about how you use it as well.
So would you say there's a few hidden dangers with AI when it's not used the right way?
100%. If you don't know what you're asking for, and if you sometimes people think, look, I mean, AI told me this and it should be right, but it depends how you ask the question. I mean, have you fed all what you need, all the inputs you need into it to get the answer the right answer, or not? You know, and I think what we're seeing when people get into dispute or asking legal questions, if they don't understand the laws they're dealing with, they ask the wrong questions, they get wrong answers.
So do you think it has a propensity or the potential to get small business owners in a bit of hot water, or reduces, I guess, the ambition to seek professional advice, and they become a bit reliant and lazy on what AI spits out at them?
I think a lot of people will be tempted because, I mean, AI up to a certain point is free, right? And that's where I tend to come in and I'll say, look, advice SBDC gives is free as well. So reach out to us first, right? We can help you. And if we want to ask AI, we can ask AI, but always verify with an expert. Don't take AI's word for it. You know, I mean, there are a lot of cases where AI will get it right. And I'll say AI's got potential, but it's a question of how you use it and how you feed it and how you educate it first.
Saj, before we wrap things up, in one sentence, what does the next 12 months look like for the Small Business Development Corporation? Is there anything that you're specifically looking at or focusing on?
Look, there's a second round of a small business growth grant. We're going to roll this out between now and the next 6 months. That's the plan.
And what does that mean as a growth grant? What does that enable small businesses to do? To what level of funding does that offer?
Yeah.
What does that actually mean?
So it will be like a co-contribution to a maximum of 10,000 per small business to be able to get these vouchers from the Small Business Development Corporation to go out and get professional services to help their businesses grow, whether it's in marketing or any sort of professional services to help their businesses grow, right? So that's why we call it a growth grant. There's been 1.4 million allocated in the state budget for the SBDC to roll this out during this financial year. That's going to be one key focus. But apart from that, with all what's in the budget as well, we're expecting there'll be much more activity for small businesses, right? So we're asking, we've asked the government for some funding to help us work with the Office of Digital Government to work on a project to make it easier to do business in the WA, right? So what we want to do is we want people to come to us early, right? And as we're setting up a small business to help them through the approval process so they understand what are the next steps, what are the different approvals they need to be able to run their business, right? That's one thing. And the third thing is we are in supporting the government's Made in WA plan. At the SBDC, we see it as how do we make it easier to do business in WA, right? By that, what we mean is streamlining approvals. So we're working with several government agencies to look at ways of reducing forms, to look at ways of where we can provide the information to government, I would say once, and this information is shared between different agencies to process different licenses. So that's one of the key projects which the SBDC will be working on during the next financial year.
Well, I guess the theme or the message is to turn to us, and I think you've made that quite loud and clear. When you think of SBDC, think of turn to us. It plays an important role in the development and ensuring small businesses thrive. So, Saj Abdoolakhan, CEO and Commissioner of the SBDC, thanks for joining us on the video podcast of Package under the LSA umbrella today.
Thank you very much, Peter. Thank you for having us.
Our pleasure.